If I told you that divorce saved my life, would you believe me? Most people think divorce only brings pain, but for me it started my freedom. Let me tell you how it all began. My story may sound strange, yet every word is true. This is the life I have lived, the life I thought was perfect, but it almost destroyed me. My name is Alisa. I am 69 years old and live in the United States. People often look at me and say I am strong, but I want to tell you the truth. I want to share my journey, my life so far. I was married for many years. By many years, I mean almost my whole life. I entered this house as a young bride with dreams, but those dreams slowly turned into duties. From the first morning of my marriage to the last day with my husband, I lived for him. I cooked 3 meals each day. I ironed his shirts. I scrubbed the floors. I kept everything in order so he never lifted a finger. People praised me as a good wife, and I thought that was my identity. I believed my worth was to serve him. I never asked for anything for myself. I did not buy clothes without his permission. I did not meet friends without telling him first. My days began with his needs and ended with his mood. Sometimes I was tired, sometimes I was sick, yet I told myself this was love. I told myself a wife must sacrifice. I thought if he was happy, I was happy too. That belief was so deep I never imagined a life without him. You may ask if I felt trapped. The truth is, I did not know I was trapped. I thought this life was normal. I thought love meant giving everything and expecting nothing. I thought silence was peace. Looking back now, I see how blind I was. But then I believed this was the only way to live. There were times I wanted to say I was tired, but I swallowed my words. There were nights I wished to talk about my feelings, but he was always busy with himself. I waited for him to notice me, to ask how I felt. But that moment never came. Still, I never complained. I thought maybe every marriage was like this. Maybe I was too weak to ask for more. I remember one day when I had a fever. My body burned. My head felt heavy. Yet he asked me to iron his clothes. I stood there, tears in my eyes, pressing his white shirt while my hands shook. I wanted him to say, "Leave it. You need to rest." Instead, he said, "Do not leave any wrinkles." That day, I felt something inside me break, yet I still did not fight back. I told myself, this is my duty. My life became a pattern. Wake up, cook, clean, serve, sleep again and again. I lost myself. I forgot what I liked, what I wanted, what made me smile. Outsiders thought we had a perfect marriage. They said, "Look at her. She takes such good care of him. She is so lucky." Lucky! That word cut me like a knife. Deep inside, I felt empty. I had no luck. I was lost. Yet I held on to hope. I kept telling myself, one day he will see how much I love him. One day he will thank me. I waited for years, but that day never came. Instead, something else arrived. Something that turned my life upside down. One evening, he sat at the table. His face was hard, his eyes cold. I thought maybe work had angered him. I softly asked if he wanted tea. He shook his head and said words I never expected. "I want a divorce." First, I laughed nervously. I thought he was joking. How could he say that after so many years? But his expression did not change. My hands shook. My voice cracked. I begged him. I said, "We can fix this. I will change. I will try harder." I was ready to bend even more. Though I was already bent to the floor, he did not listen. He had decided. He said he wanted his freedom. He said he was tired. Tired. That word felt like poison. Tired of what? I had given him everything. What more did he want? That night I cried like a child. I held his hand. I begged him to stay, but he pulled away. The man for whom I lived every second walked out, and I could not stop him. I felt my whole world collapse. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. I wanted to run, but my legs were heavy. It was the most helpless moment of my life. In the next days, I tried to stop him. I cooked his favorite meals. I spoke softly to him. I prayed. I thought maybe he would change his mind, but nothing worked. The papers were signed. My marriage ended with a few strokes of a pen. Just like that, decades of sacrifice were thrown away. Do you know how it feels when your whole life vanishes in a moment? It is like standing unprotected in a storm. It is like drowning, and no hand reaches for you. That is how I felt. A woman who gave everything now stood with empty hands. Yet I want to tell you something. That moment, as painful as it was, also began my true story. Back then, I did not know it. Back then, I saw only darkness, but life had a plan for me. A plan I could not see, but a plan that would free me one day. Here, my journey begins. This is the story of how I lost everything and how that loss opened a door I never imagined. I still remember the night he said it. The words hit me like a blow. Richard looked at me and said he wanted a divorce. His voice was calm, but my world fell apart. I thought it was a bad dream. I thought he would take back his words, but he did not. He looked at me with cold eyes, without pity. I begged him. I told him I could change. I told him we could try again. I promised to work harder. I promised to give up even the little I kept for myself. I was ready to lose everything if he would stay. But nothing moved him. His heart was far away. I held his hands and cried. I asked him to remember our years together. I reminded him of the home we had built. I reminded him of the love I had given. But he said nothing that gave me hope. He only said he was tired. He only said he wanted peace. I could not understand that. How could peace mean leaving me? That night, I could not sleep. I sat on the bed and cried until my body shook. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. I wanted to run, but my legs felt weak. I pressed my face into the pillow, wet with tears. I felt like a child who suddenly lost everything. In the morning, I tried again. I cooked his favorite meal. I smiled when he walked in. I spoke gently, hoping he would soften, but he ate in silence. He looked at me as if I were not there. My heart broke again. For days, I kept trying. I prayed at night. I begged him in the morning. I told him I could not live without him. But his eyes showed me the truth. In his heart, he had already left me. His body was present, but his love was gone. One evening, he placed papers on the table, divorce papers. My hands shook when I touched them. I begged him not to do it. I said we could fix things. He said it was too late. He said nothing could change his mind. My chest burned. I thought I could not breathe. I tried to delay it. I told him I needed more time. He said I could take a few days, but it would change nothing. He was sure. His voice was calm. Mine was broken. I felt I was fighting a war I could not win. When I finally signed the papers, it felt like death. I saw my name beside his, forever apart. The pen slipped from my hand, yet I kept writing. My tears fell onto the paper. I wanted to tear it up, but it was too late. Years of marriage ended with a few lines. After that, I watched him pack his things. He took his clothes, his books, his belongings. I stood in the corner and could not move. Every item he put in the bag felt like a piece of me. I wanted to scream, "Stop! That is my life too." But I said nothing. My lips would not move. As he walked to the door, my eyes followed him. He did not look back. He did not pause. He walked away as if I were nothing. The door closed, and with that sound, my world broke apart. I fell to the floor and cried until I could not breathe. I felt as if my soul had been torn apart. The days that followed were even worse. I walked like a ghost through the house. I touched his shirts still hanging in the closet. I smelled them and cried. I sat at the table and looked at his empty chair. I made tea and poured 2 cups by mistake. Then I remembered he was gone. The pain was sharp. People called me. Some gave advice. Some told me to move on. Some said I was now free. Their words hurt even more. They did not know my heart. They did not know I had given him my whole life. Without him, I felt worthless. The nights were the worst. I lay in bed and stared at the empty space beside me. I hugged the pillow and pretended it was him. I closed my eyes and hoped to wake and find it was only a dream. But each morning reality returned. He was gone. I blamed myself. I asked what I had done wrong. Had I not loved him enough? Had I not been kind enough? I searched for answers, but there were none. The truth was simple. He wanted to leave. He had chosen to go, and I could do nothing. I thought my story ended that day. I thought I would spend the rest of life in darkness. But I was wrong. Life had other plans for me. I just could not see them yet, but something new waited for me. The day my world collapsed was the day my new story began. Like, subscribe, and share. When Richard left, my world fell silent. The house felt heavy, yet it was not the walls. It was my heart. I sat for hours in one spot, not knowing what to do. I waited for him to return. I waited for his steps, for his voice calling my name, but only silence came. The first night alone was endless. I lay in bed, turning toward the side where he once slept. I reached out, but the space was empty, cold. I hugged the pillow and cried until my throat hurt. My tears would not stop. My chest ached as if it would break. I thought, this will be my end. Alone, crying, forgotten. Morning came, but it gave no comfort. I sat with a cup of tea at the table. I had made 2 cups, then remembered he was not there. I stared at the second cup until the tea turned cold. I poured it away, but the pain stayed. Day after day, I repeated the same. Wake up, cry, sit and wait. I had no energy. I had no hunger. Food had no taste. My body grew weaker, but I did not care. I told myself, why eat? Why live when the person you lived for is gone? I no longer met other people. I no longer answered the phone. When neighbors knocked, I acted as if I was not home. I did not want their pity. I did not want their advice. I wanted only Richard, and he was gone. At night, I heard voices in my head. They said I was worthless. They said I was old. They said nobody needed me. I believed those voices. I believed I was nothing without him. I pulled the blanket over my head and cried until my body shook. I could never fall asleep easily. I closed my eyes, but memories of him filled my mind. His laugh, his voice, his touch. Then I remembered his last words. I want a divorce. The memory stabbed my heart again and again. Weeks turned into months. 6 months of pain. 6 months of loneliness. I counted the days, but they all felt the same. Every day was dark. Every night was long. Time passed, but I stayed stuck. My family kept their distance. They did not know how to deal with me. Some friends tried to tell me I was lucky to be free. Their words hurt even more. Free. I did not feel free. I felt broken. I felt empty. One evening, I walked past a mirror. I stopped. I saw my own face. My eyes were red. My skin was pale. My lips showed no smile. I stared at myself for a long time. I whispered, "Who are you now?" I had no answer. Without him, I was nobody. At least I believed that. Yet, even in the darkest nights, a small voice inside refused to be silent. It whispered, "You are still here, Elisa. You are alive." I tried to push it away. I tried to silence it, but the voice returned. It came when I cried. It came when I sat alone. It said, "Your story is not over." I did not believe it. But those words gave me something. A tiny spark. A reason to open my eyes each morning. A reason to breathe one more day. 6 months of pain passed. Yet inside that pain, something changed in me. I realized if I could survive those months, I could survive anything. The worst had already happened. Richard had left me. My marriage had failed, and still, I breathed. I will not say I was strong then. I was not, but I was alive, and being alive meant there was still a chance for something new, a chance for me. At the end of those 6 months, I stood before the same mirror again. My eyes were still tired, but this time, I asked a new question. What if my life is not over yet? What if this is only the beginning? That thought stayed in my mind. It was small, but it was enough to change my heart. I decided I could not drown the rest of my life in tears. I had to try. I had to find out who I was without him. Those 6 months of darkness had not killed me. They had shaped me. They had prepared me. They had made me ready for the next part of my life. I thought my story would end in sorrow, but fate held another page for me. Like, subscribe, and share. 6 months had passed. 6 months of crying, begging God for answers, feeling like a shadow. I thought I could never stand up again. But one morning, something happened. I walked slowly through the house. My eyes were tired. My steps were heavy. I stopped before the mirror. At first, I did not want to look. I hated my reflection, but I forced myself. I lifted my head. I looked at my own face. I saw a woman I did not know. Her eyes were swollen. Her skin was pale. Her lips were weak. I whispered to myself, "Who are you?" The voice was so soft, yet it shook me inside. For years I had been only his wife. That was my identity. I had lived for Richard. I had lived for his needs, his moods, his choices. Now he was gone, and nothing was left for me. I stood there for a long time. Tears filled my eyes, but I did not look away. I asked myself again and again, "Who are you, Elisa? Who are you without him?" It was the first time in years I spoke to myself. It felt strange, it felt painful, yet also new. I realized I had never asked this question. I had never seen myself as a separate person. I was always part of him, his wife, his shadow, his helper, never myself. The mirror gave no answer, but the question stayed. I walked away, but the words followed me. Who am I? Who am I now? That day I could not stop thinking about it. I remembered the little girl I once was. I remembered dreams I once had. I remembered that I used to sing. I had once laughed. I wanted more. Somewhere on my path I lost all of that. I gave it away. I buried it under duty. I cried again. But this time the tears were different. They were not only for Richard. They were for me. For the woman I forgot. For the life I sacrificed. For the years I could never regain. That evening, I sat at the table and wrote in a small notebook. I wrote one line, "I am still here." My hand shook, but the words were clear. I am still here, It was not strength yet. It was not courage yet, but it was a start. The next morning, I looked in the mirror again. My face was the same, but I spoke out loud. I said, "Elisa, you are not gone. You are not only his wife. You are you." The sound of my own voice surprised me. It was weak, but it was real. I had not heard myself for so long. I touched the glass and whispered, "I will find you again." That promise became my new breath. It was small, but it held me upright. The darkness was still there. The pain was still sharp. But now there was also a question that opened a door. Who am I if I am not his wife? I had no answer yet, but I was ready to search. That was the day my life began to change. Not in big steps, not with sudden joy, but with a question in the mirror. A question that gave me the strength to start again, like subscribe and share. The question in the mirror stayed in my mind. Who am I? Who am I without him? I could not forget it. It followed me through the days. It whispered to me at night. It made me restless, yet it also woke something inside me. One morning, I sat at the table. I held a pen in my hand. I opened a notebook and wrote again. This time, I wrote more than one line. I wrote, "I am still here. I want to live. I must find myself." The words looked strange on the page, but they gave me strength. I decided to do one small thing, something only for me. For the first time in years, I cooked a meal I liked, not his favorite food, not something he wanted, only mine. I sat at the table and ate slowly. Tears filled my eyes because it felt new. It felt like feeding myself, not just surviving. The next day, I looked at my hands. The same hands had washed, cleaned, ironed, and served for him. Now, I wanted them to work for me. I asked myself, what can I do with these hands? Then something came to mind. Years ago, I had loved sewing. I loved making small things from fabric, but I had given it up. Richard once told me it was a waste of time, so I stopped. That memory made me cry. But after the tears, I felt a spark. I walked to the closet. I found an old box with needles and thread. My fingers shook when I touched them again. I began to sew a small piece of cloth. It was simple, but it felt like life. That tiny stitch was my first step. The needle went in and out, and with each move a part of me returned. I was not fast. I was not perfect, but I was alive. In the next days, I made more small things, a fabric bag, a scarf, a little table mat. I looked at them and smiled for the first time in months. I thought, this is me. This is my work. This is my choice. One afternoon, a neighbor came to visit. She saw one of the pieces I had made. She asked if I could make one for her too. At first, I was shy. I said I was not good enough, but she insisted. She gave me a little money for it. My hand shook as I held the bills. It was not much, but it was mine. Money from my work. Money from my time. That night, I sat in bed and stared at the cash. I whispered, "Elisa, you can do this. You can stand on your own." It was not about the money itself. It was about the feeling. For the first time, I was not only a wife, I was a person who could create, earn, and decide. Slowly, the news spread. Other women asked me to make things for them. They praised my work. They told me I had talent. I felt something new, respect. Not the kind of respect I had begged from Richard, but respect for my skill. Each time I worked with my hands, I felt lighter. Each time someone smiled at my creations, I felt seen. Each time I earned a bit of money, I felt free. But it was not only about sewing. It was about time. For years, my time was not mine. Every hour belonged to him. Now, Even when I was alone, those hours were mine. I could use them as I wished. This freedom first scared me, but then it gave me peace. I realized I no longer had to beg for worth. I could give worth to myself. I could decide what mattered. I could choose what I wanted to do. It was not easy. I still cried at night. I still missed him sometimes. I still felt the pain of being left. But I also felt something new growing inside me. Strength, hope, freedom. One evening, I looked in the mirror again. I touched the glass and whispered, "Find yourself, Elisa. You are more than his wife. You are you." This time, I believed it a little more. The first steps were small. One meal for myself. One stitch in cloth. A neighbor's smile. A little money in my hand. But these small steps moved me forward. They carried me out of the dark. I learned that I could live. I learned I could even rise. And that was only the start. Like, subscribe and share. I never thought small steps could change a life. But slowly, my work began to grow. First it was one neighbor, then another. Soon people I did not even know came to me. They wanted the things I had made. They said my work was special. They said it was made with care. When I earned real money for the first time, I sat and stared at it, amazed. It was not about the bills. It was about the meaning. For years I had worked without pay and without thanks. Now the world gave something back to me for the first time. I saved the money in a small box. Each week, a little more went in. Each time I opened the box, I felt proud. It was proof that I could stand on my own feet. Proof that I was no longer helpless. Proof that I could live without him. The orders kept coming. I started working longer, but this time it did not feel like slavery. It felt like a calling. Every stitch was mine. Every design was mine. Each piece carried part of me. When people smiled and praised my work, I felt alive. I used the money to buy more fabric and better tools. I invested in myself, something I had never done before. With every step, my business grew. With every step, my confidence grew. Soon I earned more than I had ever imagined. My savings increased. I paid bills without fear. I bought things without asking for permission. I felt a power I had never known, the power of freedom. But the best part was not the money. It was the respect. Women from the community came to me. They asked how I had started. They asked how I kept going. They said I was an inspiration. I looked at them and smiled with tears in my eyes. I, Elisa, once sure life was over, now gave others hope. I began to help people. I gave free items to women who had little. I shared part of my earnings with families who struggled. I listened to their problems and told them my story. I said, if I can do it, you can too. The more I gave, the richer I felt. Not only in money, but also in spirit. I was no longer empty. I was full of purpose, full of life. One day, a local newspaper wrote about me. They called me a woman of courage. They wrote how I rebuilt myself after divorce. When I read the article, I cried. Not from sadness, but because my once worthless life now held value to others. Soon, I was invited to speak to groups. I stood before women who had lost hope. I told them my story. I spoke of pain, of nights full of tears, of the mirror that asked who I was, and I told them about small steps, the first stitch, the first sale, the first smile. They listened with open hearts. Some cried with me, others hugged me afterward. They said my words had given them strength. Then I realized my story was not only mine, it was a gift for others. Wealth comes in many forms. Money, respect, freedom, peace. I now had all of them, not because of him, not because of anyone else, but because I chose to rise, because I chose to live. There were still moments when I remembered the pain, but these memories no longer ruled me. They became fuel. They reminded me how far I had come. I was no longer the woman who begged for love. I was no longer the wife who lived in fear of abandonment. I was Lisa, strong, independent, free. When I now looked in the mirror, I no longer asked, "Who are you?" I knew the answer. I smiled and said, "You are enough. You are more than enough." Success had changed my life, but even more, freedom had given me peace. I no longer lived in darkness. I lived in light that I had made myself. And that was only the beginning. I was no longer the woman who cried each night. I was no longer the woman who lived in silence. I had found myself. I had built something of my own. People respected me. Women saw me as a role model. I had wealth. I had freedom. And I had peace. Then one evening, something happened. I never thought would happen again. Richard came back. I was sitting at the table when I heard the knock. My heart skipped a beat. When I opened the door, I saw him. The man who had left me. The man who broke me stood there. His hair had turned grayer. His face looked tired, but his eyes were different. This time, they were not cold. They were searching. For a moment, I froze. My hands trembled. My breath stopped. Memories rushed back. Nights full of tears. Days full of loneliness. The moment he said he wanted divorce, the door banging shut, all hit me at once. He spoke softly. He said my name, Alisa. At first I did not answer. I only stared at him. Then I stepped aside, and he came in. We sat facing each other, as we had done so many times. But this time, the air felt different. I was no longer the same woman. I was no longer the one who begged. I was no longer the one who feared. I was someone new. He began to speak. He told me he had seen my name in the newspaper. He said he had heard of my work, of how much people respected me. He said he was proud. His words sounded strange to my ears. Where was that pride when I ironed his shirts with fever? Where was that pride when I begged him not to leave? I listened in silence. Then he said the words I knew would come. I made a mistake. I should not have left. I want to come back. My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to cry. Part of me wanted to laugh. He wanted to return now, after all the pain, after I rebuilt from nothing. I looked at him closely. His eyes were gentle, almost pleading. He was no longer the strong, cold man who once walked away. He was now smaller, weaker. But I remembered everything. I remembered the nights I lay on the floor, crying until I could not breathe. I remembered the mornings when I had no reason to wake up. I remembered the shame as I signed those papers with tears on my face. And I remembered how I rose again. I remembered the first stitch, the first coin I earned, the respect in women's eyes. The moment I looked in the mirror and told myself, "You are good enough." He asked again. He said he was lonely. He said he wanted me back. He said we could start fresh. Tears filled my eyes, but they were not for him. They were for me. For the woman who once begged this same man to stay. For the woman left behind as if she were nothing. I said softly, "You walked away after I gave you my whole life. You slammed the door while I knelt. You left me when I was weak. Now I am strong and I will not go back." He lowered his head. He tried to argue. He said he was sorry. He said he had been a fool. He said he wanted another chance. I shook my head. "Richard, I said. I forgive you, but I cannot take you back. I found my peace without you, and I will not lose it. The room was silent. He looked at me, but he saw it in my eyes. My choice was final. The woman who once lived for him no longer existed. He left again that night, but this time I did not fall to the floor. I did not cry until I could not breathe. I did not beg. I stood tall. I watched him walk away, and I felt no fear. I felt free. As the door closed, I turned to the mirror. I looked at my reflection. I smiled through my tears. I whispered, Elisa, you did it. You chose yourself. In that moment, I saw the truth. The divorce had not destroyed me. It had saved me. It had given me a second chance at life. And when the past knocked, I was strong enough to say no. Like, subscribe, and share. When Richard left the second time, I did not cry. I did not hit the floor. I did not beg. I stood still, and I felt a strange calm inside me. It was not anger. It was not joy. It was peace. For years, I had believed he was my whole world. For years, I had thought my life would end without him. But now, as the door closed behind him, I knew the truth. I did not need him. I needed neither his approval, nor his presence, nor his love to exist. I had found myself, and that was enough. I went to the mirror, as I had so many times before. I saw the woman standing there. Her eyes were now stronger. Her lips held a small smile. Her shoulders were straight. I whispered to myself, You did it, Elisa. You survived. You grew. You chose yourself. The memories of pain were still in me. They would never fully leave, but they no longer controlled me. They were part of my story, but not the whole story. They were the shadows that made my light shine brighter. I thought about Richard's words. He said he was sorry. He said he wanted me back. Years ago, I would have given anything to hear those words. I would have fallen at his feet. I would have thanked him just for staying. But now those words meant nothing to me. They came too late. In my heart, I forgave him. Not for him, but for me. I did not want to carry hate. I did not want to carry anger. I wanted peace. And peace comes only when you let go. So, I let go. I let go of the years I had given away. I let go of the nights I had cried. I let go of the woman who felt worthless. I closed this chapter not with bitterness, not with regret, but with grace. I stood at the window and whispered, Thank you, life. Thank you for breaking me. Thank you for teaching me I am more than what I lost. Thank you for giving me a second chance. In the days that followed, I worked as usual. I helped women who came to me for advice. I told them my story. I told them the truth. Pain can break you, but it can also build you. Love can hurt, but self-love can heal. Divorce is not always an end. Sometimes it is the beginning. I saw hope in their eyes. Some of them were where I once was, crying quietly, begging for love, feeling invisible. I told them, You are not invisible. You are enough. You can rise. And when they believed me, even just a little, I felt my purpose grow closer. I no longer lived in the past. I no longer waited for Richard to return. I lived in the present. I lived for myself and for others who needed proof of healing. One morning, I woke up and smiled for no reason. That had not happened in years. I did not smile because of anyone else. I smiled because I was alive, because I was free, because I was myself. I now had wealth. I had respect. I had a name people knew. But none of that was my real treasure. My real treasure was peace. The kind of peace no one can take from me. The kind of peace that appears when you choose yourself. That day, I understood something. Divorce had not ruined my life. It had given my life back to me. It gave me the chance to start over at 69. It gave me strength to face pain and still move on. It gave me freedom. I will not lie. The path was hard. There were nights I thought I would not survive. There were mornings I wished I would not wake up. But I survived. I woke up, and every step, every tear, every small brave act led me here to peace. Now, when I sit with people, I do not hide my story. I tell it openly. I tell them about the pain, the loss, the nights full of tears. And then I tell them about the freedom, the joy, the peace that followed. I want them to know that life does not end when love ends. Sometimes people ask me if I would ever take Richard back. I smile and say, I once gave him my life. Now this life belongs to me, and that is the truth. I do not hate him. I wish him no harm. But my path is now different. My heart is free. My soul is calm. I choose peace over the past. When I watch the sunrise now, I whisper a prayer of thanks. Not for what I lost, but for what I gained.